This is our, let's see, our fourth heart-to-heart, and we've had over about 125 people, maybe 130 by now. So we really appreciate you attending, and you're coming, I think, because maybe somebody invited you, somebody saw it in the bulletin, somebody saw in the 411 and so on. So we're really happy that you're here. Couple just housekeeping. Washrooms are down the hall. Go through the double doors there. Washrooms are down in that area. And again, if you need to get something to drink or so on during the presentation, just walk behind and maybe even walk behind the camera. We are televising this. This is the first time we've done this. And we're doing this because there are certain people that at certain times, all of a sudden, they may need information that we are talking about here. And so that's the reason we're going to be doing it. And they can't get to a workshop. In fact, I talked to one lady this week, and she really wanted to come, but she couldn't. And so I said we're televising it, and she said she would like to have a video, and I said yes, and that we would get that to her. So we're trying to be as proactive as we possibly can. This workshop is really sponsored by ARC, that's Adult Resource Center. We're trying to work with senior adults. We're trying to work, and it's hosted really by Thrivent. We thank them for the food. We thank them for the speaker. We thank Pete here for being the contact with Thrivent. And what we do there is we call him up and tell him how much. We send him the bill and all those type of things. And so we're happy that you're here. Okay, that's great. The presentation is going to be given by Scott. Scott is a representative of Thrivent, and I have from the website your Chicago Regional Office. And I know there's a title, and if you want to say the title when you come, that's really up to you. But again, we hope that you enjoy. I know you will enjoy it, not hope, you will enjoy it, and we hope that you are willing to talk with one another and share. And Scott, you're on.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Is this too loud? Okay. Good morning. As Ken said, my name is Scott Reffett. I'm a partner with Thrivent. Often I've thought of coming up here and just making up a title because, you want to do that once in a while. I have 3 boys, and I'm married. Been married 22 years, I think. My wife's not here today, so it's 22 years. So we had a tough year a couple years ago, and I want you guys to imagine a couple of things with me. So we had decided to go to Florida. Okay, so we're going to go to Florida, and it was sunny out like this, day like this. And so do me a favor real quick, if everybody would, we've all experienced this, right? We had an early morning flight to Florida. And what do you do on an early morning flight to Florida? You sleep or you ignore the people next to you. Or you fake sleep, right? So I want you guys to experience what I experienced just for a minute. So close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. So I'm in the middle seat. I got 2 family members next to me, and I got my eyes closed, not because I was sleeping, because I really didn't want to talk to anybody at this point. And so I get a little hand bumping me, and I ignore it, because, being a good parent, I ignored it. So I get this hand bumping me again, and I kind of, how when you come out, when your eyes open, it's early in the morning, you're kind of there, you're kind of not. That was me. And this little hand, finally I said, "What do you want?" And this little hand said, "Are we ready?" I kind of ignored that. Little hand said, "Are we ready?" Again. See, that little hand wasn't one of my sons. You can open your eyes now. It wasn't one of my sons, it was my sister. Because I was with my sisters. I had 2 sisters with me, and we were heading to Florida because my parents had a house in Florida, and my father had a major stroke. And we had gotten that phone call. And so we were on our way to Florida. And so today's all about, would you be ready if you got that phone call today? Anybody feel like, yeah, we'd be ready, we're prepared? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're really going to talk about not the paperwork part of being ready, not that, but really have you had those conversations? So here's some of the things we hope to accomplish today. We really want to have, and today isn't about me giving you the perfect roadmap for that. It's really, I am simply here as a facilitator. I am simply here to help you think about the conversations you will have and some of the things you should talk about. So really, not only understanding your parents' visions of the future, but it helps you help them make some fairly important decisions. Information that really, and at this second one, it says information to make decision on your parents' behalf. I would really challenge that one. I've often thought about changing it, but we're a large organization, and changing things is called compliance, and I'm not good with that, so I ignore it. So that's really what we're going to do. I would say that middle one, I always tell this to people, especially is that your parents will always be your parents. They don't become your kids. They're still your parents, and you should always remember that. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So interesting, the average 65-year-old will live to be 84, and since we first did this, the reason there's an asterisk with that is rapidly changing. Rapidly changing. That age, for every year, if you're married at 65, the odds of one of you or your spouse reaching 90 plus is now something like 65 or 70%, and it climbs every year. Yeah, don't laugh, Karen, you'll get there. So what's the benefits of having this conversation now? The benefits are your parents are going to be around longer, right? And just the ability to have those conversations is key, and doing it now. You have a longer time period. You have a lot more quality time with our parents than they had with theirs, perhaps, and farther back. And the last one is key up on the screen here, is helping them live their legacy. So these are the things we're going to talk about. So I want to get level set a little bit. Everybody's got one of these workbooks? Yes? Okay, a couple things we're going to go by. If you look up in the screen, see where the number 2 is on the screen? That's what page you're on. It's up to you whether you follow along that way or not. A lot of you have probably already looked ahead, because that's what we do, right? We look ahead. Got to get ahead of everybody. But I would tell you, turn back to like pages, I think it starts at page 18, 19, 20. There's some great resource information back here. These are great books. We will not cover everything on this book, so I would challenge you to take it home, reread it. There's some resources, and then if you go past pages 18, 19, you get in the 20s. There's some checklists you can use and things like that. If anybody has siblings or neighbors that want some of these books, talk to Pete, talk to Karen, talk to Ken Black, and we can get you some extra of these books. We have a fairly high demand on those. So I guess my question to you is, like I said earlier, how many of you are ready? How many of you have had that conversation with your parents, or a conversation with your aging parents? Well, that's fantastic. Anybody willing to share? Anybody that went really well? It was perfect? Got everything accomplished? Come on. Anybody want to share? Go ahead.
Well, everyone knows that my mom died a bunch of years ago, but we had a real open conversations, so we were real comfortable in the life, and we had to make decisions. We had to, when we had to take her off, we didn't even have life support at all, but we knew what her decisions were. We knew how she wanted to die. We even talked about funeral. So it made her death and the celebration afterwards so much nicer because we had those conversations.
Absolutely.
It was really good.
Great. Thanks for sharing. These are the challenges we face. Logistics, right? I mean, I came today from Geneva. That's not that far. My parents live in Florida. Our logistics were interesting. I'll share with you my sisters and I logistics. My 2 sisters live down by Peoria, Illinois, little town, Canton, Illinois. Anybody know Canton, Illinois? We were the Little Giants, by the way. So they live in Canton, Illinois. I got a phone call, and we all have smartphones, cell phones, whatever. We're in constant contact these days, right? So my telephone rang that fateful morning at 6:30 in the morning. I get up early. That's not unusual for me. But I did what most people do at 6:30 in the morning. When they see a phone number that they don't recognize, what do? Nothing, right? I don't answer it. I didn't answer that phone. I set it aside. I'm like, wrong number. I didn't recognize the area code. Because you see, it wasn't a Florida area code, and it wasn't an Illinois area code, and those are really the only ones I really know. So I set it aside. But the phone kept ringing. And finally, I answered the phone, and I get a phone call from Joe. I don't know a Joe. And Joe says, and Joe knows me. And Joe says to me, your mother's in the hospital, and she can't talk. That's why I'm calling. And this is the way I reacted. Because it's 6:30 in the morning. It's 2 days before Thanksgiving. We're getting ready to go to Florida, right? We were going to go to Florida. So I take a deep breath and I said, what's wrong with my mom? Let me talk to my dad. And Joe says, that's why your mom can't talk, because she's in the hospital, and you can't use cell phones in the hospital. Your dad's in the hospital. See, my dad had that massive stroke, and Joe, which is really funny, a side story, Joe's legally blind. Joe drove my mom and dad to the hospital. They're in Lake Okeechobee, Florida. Anybody know Lake Okeechobee, Florida? It's a hard place to get to, by the way. You talk about logistics. I had never been there. My sisters had never been there. My parents had just bought this place that previous spring. So logistically, we decided to go to, we had to fly into Orlando. We couldn't get into West Palm Beach. So we're working. I'm talking to my sisters, and they said to me, we're coming to your house. I said, well, that's the opposite direction. You're going the wrong way. You have to go to Florida. I'll meet you in Florida. But see, they couldn't do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to go alone. They didn't want me to meet them there. They wanted to drive. So they drove to Chicago, Illinois that night because we couldn't get out that day because it's 2 days before Thanksgiving. So logistics are tough, right? How many of you have parents that live real close or far away? What about siblings? Do all your siblings live close by? How many of your siblings live at least a state away? Anybody? Yeah. So we'll talk about that. That's some of the problems. Personalities. Now, I can talk about personalities today. You might not be able to because you might have family members at the table. You will do it under your breath, perhaps, and shake your head. I have 2 extremely different sisters. I can say that. One is just would drive you crazy. That's why she lives in Canton, Illinois, and I live here. I love my sisters. Because we've had these conversations, things have went really well. But we have different personalities, attitude, preconceptions, right? And we'll talk about that. And, of course, family dynamics. I'm going to go through this real quick. The one that always cracks me up on this was the one that's 1946 to 60, experimental. Some of you will have to explain that to me, but we'll skip that. So we're going to, I think everybody in here gets the generational difference. Again, it's in the book. So we're going to, because I want to get to the part where it's interactive. This is interesting. So your parents, this was a question that was asked about 5-6 years ago, and we didn't update it. You see on the bottom, we didn't update it. It's 2006, but it actually has been updated, but the percentages really haven't changed. And the question was, will you talk about aging? And you see in your book, the parents, 76% of the time, have no problem talking about aging. When they ask that same question to their children about their parent, the children said, yeah, only 18% of the children thought their parents would be willing to talk about aging. Do you fit into that group? Do you know what your parents' feelings are about aging and what they want to accomplish? Yes? No? Scary a little bit? Preconceptions come creeping in? So we're going to talk about that. This is the impact, perhaps on you, or spouse, or children. 44% had fewer hours to work. The big one is the second one up there, retirement. I mean, that's what we're hearing about right now, right? What's the big argument in Congress and everywhere else? It's the economy. Do we have enough money to retire? The average person in the United States today has $60,000 when they retire. And imagine that if you had 80%, even less than that, because of an issue. Scary, scary thoughts. So we really want to understand the values of your parents and really what's their future vision. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier is they're always going to be your parents. Always keep that in mind. That's going to be really hard at times. So I want you to turn to page 5 in the book, and I want you to do this activity, each one of you, and we'll talk about it. And the outside circle really talks about current situation. If your parents could maintain their current situation, that would be an outer box. If they can maintain the way they currently are on those different issues, you're going to put a dot by the outer side. If you think, no, in the future they're going to need help to do those certain topics, mark it closer to the center, and then connect your dots. So take a couple minutes and do that. So everybody's wheel look perfect? Yeah, looks good. Yeah, what's perfect? So anybody willing to share with me their what stood out to them when they did their wheel? What part was unbalanced? Go ahead. Yeah, you want to grab that? Hang on just one second. We're going to get a microphone so everybody can hear. This is the part where we get Pete working really hard. So everybody go opposite. So we'll go here. We'll make Pete run back and forth. All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Share with us, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks. My family is blessed that both of my parents are still with us, but they're in very different spots right now, and that just was a recent occurrence. My mother, I was just telling some people at the table, my mother is pretty healthy. She's 86. I consider it her good, strong German genes that keeps her physically healthy and alert. My father is 87, and just this past Thursday, we had to put him in a nursing center for some extended care. So for me to do this, thinking about both parents, it was different. But if my mother was here, her perceptions would be much, much different, I think, at this point in time, because she's been the primary caretaker for my dad up until this week. So
have you identified? If I may ask you one question, then what area have you identified that might be an area that you need to have some support in? That your parents. When you look at that wheel.
Yeah, I think for my mom, it's remaining active. That's real important to her, and making sure she's able to spend time with family. I think in her case now, it's right now it's emotional support. She doesn't need the physical support, but she does, because these are tough times for her. She said to me yesterday, she said, this is not what your dad and I planned for the end of our lives, so it's tough on her.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else identify that right over here? Great. Now we're going to get Pete going back and forth. I love that. Come on, Pete. Speed it up. Just kidding. No, we can't afford 2 microphones.
We've got a number of different issues with the parents, but the biggest thing now is really the health of both of them, because neither one can actually take care of the other anymore. Okay. But they're still living independently and want to stay that way as long as possible. But it makes it really tough when one has problems because the other one really can't help them out that much. So it causes a lot of friction between who's going to go take care of what and whatever. And it gets to be really interesting when one falls down and you call the paramedics to help pick them up off the floor. And then the paramedics go back to the fire station because that's all they did was just help you get them up off the floor and then leave them. And
are your parents close to you physically?
They're in Riverside. It's her parents, and they're in Riverside. Both my parents are dead now.
Okay.
And it's totally different dynamics between her parents and what my parents were like.
Okay.
My parents were we very much talked about everything. It was very open. All decisions were made in advance. And with her dad and all, it's kind of different. He's just, I've made my decisions and doesn't even want to talk about what he's done, which makes it really tough to decide what needs to be done because you don't know what they've done. They don't want to tell you.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. Thanks for sharing, by the way. That's interesting because that happens a lot. And I think it's the tips on the conversation are simply to have, it's what's important to you. And from a male perspective, right, what kind of answer do you get? I don't know. Right? Oh, we got everything planned out. But the reality is, what you really want to talk about, especially if you're talking to your father, is how his situation could impact others. Think about that. How many fathers do we have in the group here? Right? Isn't that the most important thing to you? I mean, what happens to me is not near as important of how it affects my wife or my children. Your father's the same way. So when you're talking to a father, keep that in mind. Hey, how do you think this is, now your mom's still alive, right, you said? Yeah, how's this going to affect your wife, your mom? So, I mean, it's just getting those conversations in the right context. Let's have one other person. Anybody else want to share an item on that wheel? Yes, no? Go ahead.
Hi there.
Morning.
I've just found that I did a lot of guessing. And my situation is my mom lost her battle 7 years ago. My dad is so independent, but we have that daughter-dad situation. And he's not going to leave my sister and I in the situation that he, you know, taking care of the house. He's cleaning out the house. He has his Thrivent guy. They keep everything inside. But the conversations is what I'm hoping to, you know, to learn. He's got a handful of pills he takes every day, but he's not one for, you know, I'm feeling good. Got to get to Kiwanis. I'm out of here. You know, he's busy.
Right.
So it's
Yeah, he's still dad, right?
he's still dad.
And when
He's
you're
got
dad,
everything
you really
in
want
line.
daughters taking care of you?
Pardon?
No, you really don't want your daughters taking care of you because that's not their job. That's your job.
I see him
Right?
in the last couple years. I just have to let him. Oh yeah, I'm not going to put up the big Christmas tree next year. I think I'll get a new one. I'm not going to get up on the ladder anymore. Yeah, it's a little harder to get up. A little stiff these days.
Yeah.
And I see him slowly making his own. While I've seen it, I can't try to tell him.
Yeah.
It has to
Have
be
you had any
assault.
conversations with your dad?
No, I haven't.
Just hard
And
to get there?
It's hard to get there, and he's usually, you know, being dad, saying, "Oh, talked to the Thrivent guy yesterday. Here's what your name is on, and got it all. Okay, you're good." You know, that type of thing.
Okay, well that's a great point because I think what happens again is, especially with dads, right? And it's interesting, we don't talk about dads in this group a lot of the aging parents, and you know why? Yeah, yeah. Or as I like to say to my wife, you ground me in, you outlive me, you beat me, you win, right? She's not here again, I can say that. But the reality is, this is a dad conversation. And so we'll go there. I mean, part of the things with your dad is, again, what I would challenge you to do is think about what's important to him. Ask him, so what's important to you? What do you want to have happen? Because the reality of the situation with dads is, at one point they have to admit a couple things. It's hard. And that is, I am going to get old, I am going to get sick, and I'm going to get frail. That's a hard. Now, do you have to have him verbally admit that to you? Probably not. But once you get somebody there, then the next situation becomes easier, and that is, so how is that going to impact others that I care about? Once you get there, these conversations become really easy. And we're going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about some of the roles we play. Communicator, and that is the person that your parents will share with. Now, how many of you, raise your hands again if you have just one other sibling? Okay, so you guys put your hands out. How many have 2 or more siblings? How many have more than 3 siblings? Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because you have a role for everybody. Communicator. So we're going to talk about this in a minute. In my family, my brother was a communicator. And we had a curveball thrown to us. We had these conversations. But the problem was, my brother messed it up and died a year before my dad had a stroke. He was the communicator. He was the guy that my parents would share everything with. He died of cancer a year before my father had a stroke. He screwed our whole plan up. So we have to have a communicator. The reason I mention that, these roles may change. This is not a static event. Supporter. The supporter is that person that could be there, you can count on. My one sister is a horrible communicator. She's an awesome supporter. She's that person that could just go over and do things and take care of this, and she's just really good at that. The banker. The banker is the person to make sure the bills get paid. Now keep in mind, the banker doesn't always have to be the person that is the, quote, financial advisor for dad. It just makes sure the bills get paid, make sure things happen. I think one of the best commercials I've ever seen, and if you guys seen it, is the commercial where they get a bill in the mail. There's two people standing in the kitchen. They get a bill in the mail. Oh, it looks like, you know, mom and dad didn't pay this bill. God, I wonder what's going on with them. And the next thing, they flash to a screen, and it's parents driving the RV and just yelling and having a great time driving down the road, right? Perceptions were a little different there, right? They were worried. But the banker makes sure things get paid. Driver? Yeah? Anybody in here the driver? Yeah. And the driver's just that. They're the driver. They're the ones going to get you to and fro. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. In my family, my sister, my brother was a communicator. My sister's a driver. We have a supporter. I'm a little bit of the banker. And so we have it pretty well. I would ask you, are there siblings sitting at the same table? Anybody got their own siblings? No? Okay. I was just curious, because often I like to do it with families and say, so what I'd like you to do, we're going to flash forward here. I'm going to flash forward. I want you to go to page 8. And I want you to do that exercise. And that is recognizing, putting down the different roles. So take a few minutes. And once you do, feel free to talk at your tables, talk amongst yourselves, because I think this is a really important part. Okay? So let's share a little bit. I'll share a little bit. When we originally did our conversations, again, my brother was the communicator, and we just assigned roles. The first time we did this, we assigned roles. Have you ever been assigned a role? Did you like it? No. Well, neither did they. And I did the assigning. Yeah, right? So I liked it. My brother and sisters didn't. So we had that conversation. The sibling conversation. Now again, let me preface this. I'm using my own reference of we did it mainly with siblings. Doesn't have to be just siblings. It could be cousins. It could be aunts and uncles. It could be brothers and sisters of your parents. So let's start with the first one, the communicator. If you guys right here, back here, anybody want to share back here a communicator role? Or any one of the roles? Go ready? Here, Pete. Tell us what role, and tell us the person, and then the why.
All the roles, me.
All the roles are you.
3 siblings.
3 siblings.
1 not too far away, 2 out of state.
Yeah, I get a sense that you don't really want to be all the roles.
I'm fine with all the roles.
Yeah.
I get more frustrated with the, well, I was looking at your one page, I have 1 sibling that's aloof.
Yeah.
That whatever you do is fine. I know you'll do the right thing. You spend the most time with mom. You understand her.
Mm-hmm.
I have 1 that is my main supporter. She lives out of state. We talk all the time. She calls my mom all the time. So she has a good sense for my mom, even though she's not here. So she knows how to talk to her. She knows how, it's so funny. We won't even talk, and she'll call me and say, I talked to mom today, and I told her this, this, and this. And I said, oh, good, that's the same thing I told her. So we're in sync. We understand her needs. We understand some of the drama and how to, get it under control. And then I have a sister who is local, but I think she means well, but she's drama.
Mm-hmm.
When she comes in and my mother gets so out of her normal routines and how to react to things, it becomes everything's hype. It takes me more time to settle mom down because she needs to understand it's okay what's going on. So it's interesting. All of them. I'm okay with them.
Yeah.
It's just making sure I have to find the level for working with my mom because she is getting.
Have you and your you have 3 other? There's 4 of you total.
Yeah.
All sisters.
Yep.
Okay. So have you guys
And
ever
this
sat
person
down?
right here is my biggest supporter, my daughter.
Okay.
Because I can go over there and my mother, I can tell my mom to do something and she'll say, there you go, tell me what to do. She can go in there and say, Grandma, why don't we do this? Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great point, though. I mean, I heard a couple things there. I heard your other sister might be communicator, right? So, I mean, that's a really important point of communicator to me means that they're really that main person. Because your parents, like mine, and you made the comment, I'm sorry, Linda? Linda made the comment earlier about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but hey, I didn't sign up for this, right? My father has now recovered to a certain extent. When he had his stroke, he should have died, right? So when we walked in the hospital, here's what happened to us. Again, we had this together, right? When I'm walking in the door of the hospital, I was met at the door by the doctor. And the doctor says, you have to make some decisions. Me? I'm like, I said, well, we've got all that paperwork, right? Because the communicator, brother, had taken care of the paperwork. We all knew what was going on, right? But guess what? It didn't happen. It did not happen. My mom didn't want to make that decision, didn't want to put the paperwork, and she couldn't at that time. So there may be times, we'll talk about that a little bit, but I would say to you is that define your roles, and that's awesome that your daughter's one of those roles. And so a lot of times with other siblings or whoever that nucleus is for you, that's a meeting in of itself. And those roles aren't perfect. They blend over to each other. The hard part about these different roles is that you let somebody own their role, right? Anybody else want to share one of the roles? Come on. That means somebody else is going to share one of the other roles. Let me put it that way. Over here. Willing? Willing? Okay, there we go.
Willing. One of the things I put down different than what you have on here is mediator.
Mediator.
I come from a family of 9 kids.
Wow.
And when things came up at the end, it was a lot of arguments and disagreements on not only what needed to be done, but how it should be done, who should make decisions and everything else. And even though things were spelled out basically as far as what my parents wanted, because we spent a lot of time talking to them, and my one sister did, so we knew what was going on. I had a lot of fights with a lot of my brothers because it's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to do experimental medical procedures and all this other stuff because that's what they thought needed to be done. And what I mean by mediator is basically it's you against your siblings defending your parents. Because, yeah, I look at it as mediator because you're fighting for your parents.
Absolutely.
And that's why talking to them matters, because if you know what they want, you can defend them against anybody else. If you don't know what they want, you can't defend them because you yourself can't defend something that you don't know.
Absolutely.
So it's really important to at least talk to your parents, find out what they want. And when they make up their minds and you agree with it, then you got to fight for them against everybody else, regardless of what your other siblings think or their brothers and sisters think and things like this. It's on you then at that point.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. That's a great point right over here. We're doing this great, though. We're making Pete go back and forth, so I really appreciate that. Right over here, this young lady, Rita.
Thank you. My parents are both alive, and my dad has had cancer for a long time, and he's probably toward the end stages, but he's still very mentally with it. I feel like my mom has maybe some dementia and some problems, but I feel like each of them picked. I also have 9 brothers and sisters.
Wow, you guys are prolific
I
in this
think
area.
they picked themselves who was going to do what for them. Like my dad picked my 2 oldest brothers, and they already know everything he wants done, and this is how it's going to be. And they told us, we already know what Dad wants. We're going to handle it. We'll fill you all in. So we're like, okay. My mom has picked my sister, and she pretty much knows and has gotten power of attorney and done everything for her. So I feel like they picked who they thought should be the one in charge. And then the rest of us just fill in, like maybe they're out of state, so we could all go spend maybe a week with them, and that's how we help.
Yeah.
I guess support her in that way. But I just found it kind of interesting as we've talked that I realized they kind of picked who they wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
what.
I mean, how does that make you guys feel?
Good.
Yeah.
Like, and my dad's already is starting to sell off his own. He has a farm, so he's already doing an auction because he doesn't want us to do it. So already planned, picked out who's going to be the auctioneer, how it's going to go. Like they're doing everything almost.
That's fantastic.
So that we don't have to. So
that's fantastic. Good example for you and your kids. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else? One more? No? Any surprises if you would share this with others, would they agree with you? How many of you listed somebody on one of those roles that's not here today? Anybody? How about one of you? Would you mind sharing one of those roles and who that person is? You don't have to give me the name. You can just friend, neighbor, whatever.
Well, I have two sisters.
Okay.
I have two sisters, and at the point where it was mostly my mom who started declining due to
Okay.
dementia. It was about the same time I retired, and I'm the oldest of three, and
Okay.
therefore I'm the oldest, I'm the smartest, I'm the most capable,
Of course.
and so I'm pretty much all of those roles.
Okay.
And continue to be, and because I have the time, because I'm retired. What else could I possibly find to do with my time?
No sarcasm there, right?
No.
Okay. Just checking.
But I have a good relationship with my two sisters. One is, they're all retired, but one lives in Macomb, so
Sure, a
we
little
call her
farther
the
away.
worthless one because she's too far away. And she has an 11-year-old she's trying to keep up with. And my
Wow.
other sister is retired, but she's doing a lot of substitute teaching. So,
Are your parents in this area?
yes, they're out Downers Grove area.
Okay.
So between my husband and me, we have 3 parents left.
Okay.
And they're all over 90.
Wow.
They're almost all over 92. So, some of this, we've been there, done that. We've, got them to a certain stage.
So what's one of the roles that, when you wrote those roles down, that you didn't put yourself in all of them, but what's one of the roles you put somebody else in?
Basically supporter, because both my sisters are supportive.
Okay.
My sister who lives in the area, she'll be there today. She'll go visit them.
Okay.
And we talk on the phone all the time, which is interesting because my mom doesn't realize that we all talk. And so they can't pull anything over on us. I know, what has happened, and
Do you really think your mom doesn't think her daughters talk?
she doesn't remember.
Oh, okay.
She can't remember
Okay.
something from 1 minute, 10 minutes later.
Sure.
She won't remember that I was just there all day Thursday. She'll
Okay.
say she hasn't seen me in weeks.
Sure.
Right. Okay. But I was just there. But, we communicate. My sisters and I communicate all the time, even the one in Macomb. I've talked to her twice this week to let her know what's going on. I said, Mom thinks Dad's ready to die any second, wants him to go to the hospital, and he's fine. He has about a little bit of the flu, but
Right.
the nursing staff says he's okay. They're in assisted living. But you might give her a call to tell her the same thing Liz is telling her, that I'm telling her that he's okay. And we're going along with the medical people. That's right where you're at.
Exactly. The thing about it, thank you for sharing. The thing about it is the communicator's role isn't just with the parents, right? It's with you. And if you're the communicator, one of your obligations is to communicate with the others that are part of this. Because not everybody has the same will and skill, so to speak. So I would challenge you, if you haven't done this, do this with who you think is in that group. 9 is a challenge. 9's a big challenge. Because the odds of 9 people being close in the proximity, because where are the parents, if you don't mind me? Kentucky? Okay. So she's got a logistics issue. So, and not just a logistics issue with the parents, but with each other. So that becomes an issue too. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to honor your time. Does this statistic surprise anybody? Yeah, my father had a major stroke, and we were making a decision as I walked in the hospital door. And the reason we were making that decision is because I'm in this business and because I'm an expert, we had done this, right? I'd sat with my parents, and we had done the powers of attorney. We'd done all that. But guess where that was? That was in a lockbox in a bank in Canton, Illinois. And so when I asked my mom that day about it, I said, look, because at the end of the day, when tough decisions come and you don't want to make them, what do? You put your arm around somebody else. So I walked my mom down the hall. I said, Mom, we did this, we need, and I said, where's that paperwork? Well, that was her answer. You ever get that answer? Well, you know what that answer meant? My parents never signed any of the documents. Yeah, that was and I had bought him a lockbox to put in. I said, geez, what's in the lockbox? And she goes, well, This lockbox cost me $135 a year, and you know what's in it? Nothing. They never took anything to put it in the lockbox. Now, whose fault's that? It's mine. I didn't make sure it happened. Life happens, right? It gets in the way. We get busy. How many times you went to mow the yard and you found something else to do, right? So keep that in mind. When you're going through this stuff, make sure these are the important documents. Most people have these first two, right? They know dates of birth. They may know Social Security numbers. I would challenge anybody that has 9 siblings. I don't think you know 9 siblings. Maybe you do. How many of you know your parents' Social Security numbers? How many know your own Social Security number? Yeah? Do you know your spouse's? That scares me. My wife knows my Social Security number, and she knows my driver's license number. Any of you guys know that? I'm like, why do you know that? It scares me sometimes, right? Right. Medical information. This is really important. Get this update. Again, the back of this book has great places to write all this down if you don't have it. So one of the things we had to do, my sister works in a pharmacy. Great, she's got this. Right? So we go to the hospital. Again, we went from Chicago to Orlando. We headed north. That was a mistake because Lake Okeechobee's to the south. So we finally get there. We've got everything. And my sister said, "Did you bring it?" I said, "No. I had it, but it's in Geneva, Illinois on my desk." Oh, yeah, that's what I did. Like, yeah, how stupid am I? So we had to figure medications out. Because, see, my dad was dying. And what do when they have this? What's the first thing they ask you? Yeah, what's he taking? What'd I say? No, I said, ask my sister. She's in charge of that. And she said, I don't know. So the doctor said, look, we have a certain amount of time. We have to find this out. My parents, if you've been to Lake Okeechobee, it's hard to get around that place. It's a big lake, right? Depending on what side of the lake you live on, the hospital's up here, and they lived on the wrong part of the lake. Took us a half hour to get there, so my sister and I get in the car. We drive to my parents' place down there, and what do? We open the medicine cabinet to see, because I got a pharmacist. This is going to be a piece of cake. She knows all the drugs. Guess what we find? Old medication. Lots of it. Stuff from 1982. I'm like, this was 2011. Who keeps medicine from 1992? Apparently my parents. Right? So I have this stuff updated is the key. Same thing, financial. Most people have this one. At least they know. You don't have to know all the details. You don't have to know account balances. But you should know, hey, they've got an IRA, it's at Thrivent, it's at Merrill Lynch. You should know that. Right? Account numbers. You don't need to know exact balances. You know, someone in here talked about, Rita over here, her parents, her dad, or mom, they had it taken care of. The brothers probably know, right? But do they know the exact balances, the allocations? I don't know if that's so important, but know it. Know where they're at. Checking, savings. We dealt with a couple months ago, and they had, it was funny now, it wasn't then when we sat down with them. It was parents, and the dad had developed dementia. And it was out by LaSalle, Peru area. And they had a lot of money and very conservative. So what do you do when you have a lot of money and you're very conservative? Where do you put it? All kinds of different banks, right? There's a lot of little banks in central Illinois. And what had happened to this family, they had a lot of money. They had money in something like 17 banks in central Illinois. But guess what? They really didn't have money in 17 banks, because you know what they were doing? They kept everything. So they had a CD in this bank. This CD came due. What did they do with that money? What do people do a lot of times with CDs? You look around, you see who's got the best rate, right? Oh, I'll go over here. But I kept this piece of paper. So Mom was convinced we still have money there, right? Because the banker she was dealing with was now long retired. I know we have money there. They're making a mistake. Well, they weren't. That took us a lot of time to unravel. because it caused a lot of stress on Mom because Dad, at the time, pretty savvy guy, right? So he had all these records. So have these records. Legal, attorneys, wills, power of attorneys. Again, go ahead. Here, question, comment?
Something I started with my parents back in 2006 when Mom had her first medical crisis. And it was partly because I was busy with other things in my life, and I knew I couldn't remember everything the doctor was telling me when I'd take her places. I take notes at the doctor's office at appointments. And then I started like a journal. I'd go home and I'd type it up. I now have, we call it fondly, the Downers Grove tote bag. And if I'm out of town, my sister has the tote bag, and if anyone needs it. But in that notebook, I have a record of every medical appointment since 2006 I've taken my mom to, and also my dad.
Fantastic.
What gets funny is when I go to a doctor's appointment and the doctor says, now, when was the last time they were here? And they're trying to figure it out on the computer, and I can go flip to my book. I said it was on May 11th, 2011.
That's fantastic.
And I'm telling the doctor, well, what medications are they taking? I go flip, well, she's doing this, and this. I go, oh, okay. Can I have a copy of that? You know, they'll want my copy of what the medications
That's a great idea.
But
Thank you for sharing.
I have this master notebook of all their medical stuff. And it's got the living wills in there. It's got my power of attorney in there. So, like, if it's an emergency at the hospital and the bag goes with wherever I go,
that's
if it has
fantastic.
something to do with them, because whatever I'm going to hopefully need is in that bag, and I can give people copies of it.
That's great. If anybody else hasn't done that, I would challenge you to do that. What about this last one? We're in the internet age, right? Passwords, contact numbers, general funeral wishes. Do you know your parents' funeral wishes? Are you sure you know your parents' funeral wishes? I had a meeting with my father 3 months, 4 or a little longer than that, I guess. And he says, so my father's recovered. He'll never be 100%, but he's recovered. And my father was the kind of guy that before he had his stroke, he was riding his bike 15 miles a day. He lifted weights. He went fishing every day. He was living a pretty good life. Major changes, right? So he calls me one day, and we joke about it now. It's not really funny, but we had that relationship in our family. When my father had a stroke, when he would call me, he would sound like he was intoxicated. My father doesn't drink, but it sounded really, and I would laugh about it, and we'd laugh about it. So one day he calls me in his kind of, because when you have a stroke, it affects different things. And, people handled things differently. Some are real serious, and our family's not, which is good, because humor, I think, helps, right? So he calls me and said, I wanted to talk to you about my funeral wishes. Okay. I really didn't want to have that conversation, but we did. So I drove down to Canton, Illinois, and my mom's shaking her head. She's like, you're not going to believe this. And he was totally serious, by the way. Still is. Wrote it out. So my dad says, hey, if I die, I want to be buried at the cemetery. Wow, I'm glad I just drove 3 hours to hear this, right? I'm like, that's a revelation. And he goes, but if Luther dies after I die, I want him to be buried with me. Luther is their 100-pound yellow lab. I said, wait, what? And, I was a little shocked. And he's totally serious. He's checked it out. You can do this. He checked it out. I said, so wait, let me walk you through. Let me see this again. Are you telling me you want me to kill Luther before you die? Because is that what you're really telling me? He goes, no. He said, he said, no. He said, if Luther dies, I want Luther to be cremated, and I'm going to have him on the mantle here, but then when I die, I want you to put him in. But if I die before Luther, you're going to have to dig me up, open the casket, and put Luther in with me. He's totally serious. We have it written in. Now, it's one of those, would he really know, things. But you know what? We know what his wishes are. That's the kind of the point. And it's a joke now because it's like, who's in charge of that? And as my brother-in-law had the solution, he goes, I feel really bad for Luther because the day your dad dies, Luther's probably going to have an accident. So Luther looks at us a little funny now, so But I guess the point is know the situation. So here's the deal. Preparing for the conversation. We've had some really good conversation. I'm going to speed this up because I've taken a lot of your time. It is definitely a partnership between you and your parents. So go back to that comment I made earlier, is it's all about what's important to them. They are your parents. Will always be your parents. Some things change dynamic-wise, but they are your parents. Who's the best one to have that conversation? My sister's a teller. So am I. But she's worse because she's not here, right? But she is a teller. And literally my mom says to me about a month ago, we were going to dinner. My dad had to have an operation, so the night before, we left him home alone, and then we went to dinner. So, because he can't eat, and he didn't want to watch us eat. He was fine. But my mom says to me, we should go have a drink before dinner. I almost fell, I've never seen my mom drink, ever in my life. 48 years old. I said, what? She goes, the only way I can really handle your sister sometimes, right? Okay, we didn't have a drink, but she wanted one. So know who's best to have that conversation. And it's not a gang fight. We're going to get everybody together the day before Christmas or on Christmas, and we're going to talk to mom and dad. Doesn't go well. That does not go well. Research potential options and solutions. My father calls me one day out of the blue and says, and my sister called me before, and he says, he can't drive, right? And he says, where are my truck keys? Well, I don't know where his truck keys are. I don't have them. But my sisters, because they are who they are, said, Scott's got your truck keys, right? I'm out of town. And what did I do? Now remember, I'm pretty good at this. What's the first thing I said when my dad says, where are my truck keys? You can't drive. And I won't say exactly what he said to me because he's got colorful language at times. But he said, I don't want to drive. I need my truck keys because what if I want somebody to take me somewhere? You know what I said? Ask Rhonda. She's got your truck keys. It's my sister. No, he really didn't say that. But he had his truck keys. But the point is, no solutions, right? The options is he's got two very good buddies of his that happen to live in the same street, and they're awesome. They take my dad everywhere. And he feels guilty about that, so what's he do? He gives them the truck keys. That's awesome. It's a great solution, right? So determine those. I would challenge, if you haven't had the conversation, if you can't say in your heart of hearts that I know some of these things, start now. One topic. You don't have to answer everything at one meeting. Have you ever done that? Have you ever done that with your kids? What do your kids do? I have teenage boys. What do your kids do when we're going to talk about your life today? And what you're going to do in college, what you're going to do after college, right? They're going, whatever. It's my 16-year-old's favorite. Huh? Whatever. Those are his two favorite things. So, but understand, seek to understand, know what your parents want. You got to clear your mind a little bit of that preconception we talked at the beginning. And you have to, what does your parents really want to accomplish? At one of these gatherings, I think it was the first one, I distinctly remember a lady making a comment. Her mom had a two-story house. And she said, Mom can't go up and down the stairs anymore because she had wooden steps. And you ever wear socks down wooden steps? What do? You fall down. I don't care how old you are. And so that was her issue. So her and her mom battled. I had a side conversation. Her and mom battled about that. You know what the solution they finally came to? No, they got those socks that have the little things on the bottom of them. You know I don't know what those are called. Yeah. How much does that cost you? A lot less than the grief of the conversations. And you know what she told me? They had been having that argument for 2 years. They got to the point they couldn't stand each other over a pair of socks. Right? And you know what? She was coming from a good place. She was worried about her mom. And when she said that to her mom, I'm worried about you, the conversation started different. Right? It's not about you, it's about them. Hey, I'm worried about you. Because again, as a parent, when a child comes to you and says, Mom or Dad, I'm worried about you, I'm concerned, That's a different conversation than you go to mom and dad and say, you have to do this. I'm worried about you. Try that one time. We're not going to do these other we're running out of times, but this might take several meetings. Don't do it at Christmas. I would challenge you not to do it at a public restaurant, especially if you're my family. You might leave the restaurant earlier than you might be asked to leave the restaurant earlier. So keep it light. If you're parents or you have a sense of humor, use it. This is life, right? Everybody knows eventually we're dying. Talk in a real comfortable environment. Again, don't do this at a I would challenge you if you can avoid it. Don't ambush is really what this is talking about. And don't expect to get everything done. If you have multiple issues, that circle we did, you're not going to solve all those in one meeting. Pick the reason that circle was important, and there's one on, turn to page 20 real quick. Have your parents do that one, right? And then see if your circles match. You do one, then do that one. See if your circles match. And if they don't, you might have to have a different conversation. But what's really interesting when you have your parents do that circle, you're going to see what they think is the issue for them. And that's where I would start the conversation. Right? Most people, my father worried most about driving. Because as you guys know, when you don't have a car in today's world, and you're not mobile, man, that's independence, right? My father's an independent guy, and that's a crusher. We've got great solutions for him now. Ask clarifying questions. Again, my comment about the car keys, I should have asked what? What do you need them for? That's not so hard. You guys all figured that out right away. In my head, I had a lot more questions than that, and I asked the wrong ones. That's going to happen. But step back and ask clarifying questions. What do you need them for? Right? Listen. Use open-ended questions. Yes and no. Questions are tough on everybody. Again, I always use my teenagers as an example. The more yes and no closing questions, the more trouble I have. And really, I have told them, it's all about me. So you guys have to make my life easier. I told my wife she's in big trouble because we have 3 boys. Daughters in the family do very well versus sons. Again, go back to that original conversation. Guys aren't that person. Women are caregivers. You get it. Guys aren't natural caregivers. So if you're dealing with brothers and you think boy, he's a jerk. Well, he is, but it's because of the way we're wired. So keep that in mind. Find something for the jerk to do, right? That's why I'm the banker, right? I'm serious. They're not here. We can talk about them. Agree to disagree. My one sister and I this is our rule right here. Really, it goes like this. We don't agree to disagree. We just agree that the other one's wrong. We don't say it out loud anymore, but that's kind of the way it is. Also, allow your parents time to process this. We had a story, and I don't think it was here, but at one of the groups where they literally took the parents from their home and said, hey, we're going to go out to eat. But you know what they really did? They went to retirement villages. You know how ticked off their parents were? That's an ambush. That's a great ambush. Hey, mom and dad, boy, isn't this a nice place as they're driving through the neighborhood of this is a retirement village. Why are we here? Don't do that. Don't do that. Make sure you understand. Give your parents time to process it. Again, recap what you agreed upon. The lady with the socks, here's what she really agreed upon. You will wear those socks every time you go up and down the stairs, right? Yeah. Mom said, I will. So they agreed upon it. Decide when you need to meet again. I'm going to meet with my parents again in a couple months with my sisters, but we always meet. I meet with them first, then my sisters come. And the reason for that is because my one sister stresses my mom out tremendously, right? And my dad, who was a pretty good accounting type guy, he knew to the investments, he doesn't care about it anymore. Life has changed for him. He doesn't care. So I have to keep educating my mom and my other sister. You know why my other sister, I'm bringing her in the loop? yeah, what happens if I get hit by a bus? Right? I hope I don't get hit by a bus, but I might. Again, my brother died. He was a communicator. We did not plan for that. He was our guy. And we still are upset with him. One day we'll talk about it. So express your thanks. Thank your parents for being your parents. One of the conversations, the most powerful one I've ever heard, is a lady said to her parents, the reason I'm having this conversation is you taught me to do this. That's awesome. What's parents going to say to that? Well, we don't want to talk about it, though. Right? You taught me this. Honor your parents. We're not going to do take action number 3. I would challenge you to do it. We already talked about the childhood siblings and practice and don't give up on that. If you have, because that causes a lot of stress. My sisters and I have a better relationship today than we've ever had in my life, ever, because we know what our roles are. Judy? Pete, you want to share?
It's not at all unusual for one of the siblings to be the person in the number one role, most often the adult daughter. Having lived through this myself personally, just a bit of advice is that don't expect people to read your mind. If there's 4 of you and you're saying the burden falls to me because he won't do this or she won't do that, take it upon yourself to say to your siblings, you know what, you'd be really good to be the driver and you'd be really good to set up the medications, instead of just taking it all upon yourself and saying nobody helps me, is to actually tell people what they would be good at. And if you're the communicator, obviously, to be that one. And the other one is on the subject of taking away privileges from your parents. Driving.
Right.
If your mom or dad is at a point where they shouldn't be driving anymore, instead of being confrontational and saying you can't, suggest that perhaps they hang up the keys for a while.
Right. No, that's a great point. We had that conversation with my dad, and the reason we got him to stop driving, this is funny because Joe, the blind guy, can drive in Florida, right? And that was my dad's argument. Joe can drive. I'm like, and I said, my sister actually, I should take credit because I am here and she's not, but my sister really did it. She said to my parents, she goes, what if one of your grandchildren was out there driving? How would you feel about somebody that is in your condition driving on the road when your grandchildren are out there? Not you, but someone has, because no one, again, he's a guy, right? Nothing's going to happen to me as a guy, so keep that in mind. I'm going to be here. I'm going to introduce, I'm going to move on, recap, look at the book. We missed a lot of stuff in this book. The back is the checklist. I'm going to introduce, bring Karen Umlauf from the Adult Resource Center. They have done a tremendous job in creating resources for you. So Karen, it's all yours. Thank you.
And like fine wine, better and better and better, and more anecdotes to share. And I can just say amen to so many of the things that he pointed out as key to this, as I dealt with my mom, who's approaching 88 next month, and my dad has been gone for a dozen years, but he was the one who said, there are 4 of you, these are your jobs. And he knew us probably better than we knew ourselves, so we were very lucky that way. Almost 2 years ago, Trinity undertook a project called the Adult Resource Center in order to provide a variety of resources, knowing that 95% of the time we are responding to crisis, but with the hope that we would be a little more proactive. And as we looked after our parents, we also said to ourselves, you know what, we can do a great service as our generation ages to take care of business for ourselves too, and then to be able to turn to our kids and honestly say, it's all in place, it's all done. One of the gifts we would like you to take with today is called, excuse me, an emergency information kit. And it contains the critical documents for an emergency. The nice thing about the organization of the kit is that the first page is very factual information. And when I said to my mom, a year ago, we need to talk about some of these things so that I'm absolutely clear about what you want, not that it would be my choice, but that I'm honoring your wishes. And I said, we'll just do this a little bit at a time. And I took Scott's lead on that. Because if I said to her, we're going to sit down and fill this out, one or the other of us would have had a nervous breakdown and gone off the balcony. So page 1 is name, address, social security number, a list of people you want called first, and your primary care physician. Take a breath, go shopping, have lunch. A week or two later, page 2. It took us almost 6 months. 6 months to get all the paperwork, but that was her choice of progress, and I had to honor that. Also, she thought she had everything done. She said, oh, your father and I filled out DNR forms, 15 years ago. I had to break the news to her that they're not valid. And they were typewritten on a Royal typewriter and signed by 2 people who are no longer alive as witnesses. This is going to be a problem. Not only that, there are 7 more decisions to be made about health care power of attorney than there were at that time. So this packet contains all the key information that any senior or even someone our age would want and need to have in case of a crisis, starting with the information and going right through the healthcare medications, the financial power of attorney, the healthcare power of attorney, the do not resuscitate. And first of all, and thanks to Karen Ostrander, who designed the great logo. It's an ARC, the Adult Resource Center, but it indicates we have a heart for Trinity. And Trinity has a heart for seniors. So that's the key of this logo. It comes in 2 forms. This one with the magnet is intended to be put on the side of a refrigerator. The other is this tube, a little bigger, bolder, and we're finding that a lot of seniors who live alone prefer this one. It's more visible, but to ensure that first responders, police, paramedics, firemen, hold on one second. Know that this key information is in the house. This sticker has been made available by the Village of Roselle to go in the window or the door closest to an entrance. And it says, emergency information inside. Kit is located on refrigerator or in the freezer. Because of course in the freezer means it's protected from fire. So these stickers are also available, and you are more than welcome to take as many of either of these kits as you would find valuable for seniors, whether they're family members, neighbors. I know several retired teachers who live alone and have no family in the area, and they are very relieved to know that somebody's going to be contacted should they have a fall or an accident or heart attack or other emergency crisis. Secondly, the state of Illinois, back in July, came out with the Yellow Dot program. Yellow Dot program does, in a shorter form, for your car, what our emergency kit does for your house. And there is a gaudy yellow dot that you put in the windshield behind the driver. So in the back window, behind the driver, first responders throughout Illinois have been trained to look for that. And it's not just Illinois, it's becoming a nationwide program. It actually started in the Southeast, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, and it's moving north. And they know then that in your glove compartment is this folder filled out with name, address, who should be contacted, and maybe what might have happened to me if I'm the one who is ill at the wheel or I'm the passenger. Whether it's diabetes or heart condition, you put that on there. It allows, paramedics tell me, they can respond and get treatment for you almost 20 minutes faster if they have this information at hand. And you know that the most critical time in a crisis is 1 hour. They've got 1 hour. This saves them 20 minutes. This in the car, this in the house. The third resource we would like you to take, Paul is going to bring them to your table. If you'll see that they get passed around, we collected hard copy resources, but we made available on a website, Trinity Roselle ARC, ARC.com, and she's giving you just a sample of the pages, and the ARC website is listed at the bottom. This is our home page, and all the resources we collected, we divided into 16 categories. Those are those little green buttons that you see toward the bottom. If you were to click on any of those buttons, you would find anywhere from a dozen to up to 40 or 50 or 60 different resources, and they're all local. We stayed within a 5-mile radius of Trinity, with the exception of adding anything that was related to Lutheran services. So Lutheran Child and Family Services, Lutheran Senior Services, Missouri Synod in St. Louis, so on and so forth. Excuse me. Those sources are there. A sample, if you turn to the next page, one of the shorter ones, but one that is always of interest, is on nutrition. And there are subcategories for if you need assistance with obtaining information about the proper diet for diabetes, the proper diet for high blood pressure, but also if you know someone who needs financial assistance obtaining meals, or they can't grocery shop and you want to make sure that they're eating properly. There are government-funded sources listed, low-cost meals, and then there are people who just are tired of cooking. I know I am. And other than saying I'm making reservations for dinner, sometimes I like to have prepared meals on hand in the freezer that I can throw in the oven. And we've done some research on high quality meals that can, where you can select a menu and have a number, and you're not signing up for any long-term program or anything like that. But if you turn to the next page, you'll see a much more extensive explanation and listing for housing, because I learned something I didn't know. I thought as your parents age, or as we age, we would get to decide if we wanted assisted living or independent living or a caregiver, and Medicare was going to pay for this. No. Bottom line, NO, Medicare is not going to let you pick from a menu of services. Medicare is going to tell you this is what you're entitled to based on an evaluation. And that evaluation is made according to government standards. And those standards are, first of all, explained along with the terminology. And some people, depending on a geographical area, depending on experience, they have different concepts of what supportive living is versus continuing care versus assisted living. Three seemingly similar terms, three very different kinds of care. And then the options within a very comfortable distance of Roselle are also listed there, as well as opportunities for Lutheran communities. On the front page again, I know I'm talking long, at the bottom of the page you'll see what would have been two little red boxes. One says what's new and keep me informed. If you click on what's new, you'll have access to our monthly newsletter. And I bring you everything that I receive from the government about healthcare changes, for example, or Social Security changes. Also, though, opportunities for social activities, travel, new businesses opening, discounts for seniors. If I think it's of interest to seniors or their families, I try to put it in the newsletter. And if you click Keep Me Informed, you simply provide your email address so that anytime we have something new to share, we send you a quick email, quick email so that you can click on that link and become updated. We hope in the future to expand these services. We look toward including programs like Scott has done today and others that are relevant to seniors and to their families. And perhaps down the road, you'll find that ARC is even a fully staffed position here in Roselle. So thank you for your time. And you're going to go back by the table where Ken Black is standing and pick up anything and everything you would like. Scott has a comment.
No, I just want to ask you guys to do me a favor. If you turn the back of this book, I forgot to do this early. There's an evaluation form in the very back of our workbook. If you guys would fill that out, you don't have to put your names on it, but if you would fill that out for us, it would be very helpful. There's also a sign-in sheet at your tables that would be very helpful for the Adult Resource Center, Karen and Paula and Ken. So if you guys would do that. And I would, again, on that evaluation sheet, if there's any topics you want to talk about, let us know. If you put your name on it, we'll reach out and just make sure if there's anything you want us to follow up with. And then two last things, and one is I would challenge everybody in here, if you haven't done your own kind of long-term planning, I would challenge you to do that. The other thing I would remind you, if you have children, they're watching. So remember that. How you deal with your parents, your children are watching. My children have brought that to my attention often, so just know that your children are watching. So thanks for filling out the evaluations. I'm going to turn it over to Ken.